2 years had passed since Vash had first stumbled upon the House of the Forsaken, a dilapidated yet spirited orphanage nestled in the heart of Meridia. Within these weathered walls, he had found not only refuge but a semblance of family among the other street children who called this place home. The orphanage, though rough around the edges, pulsed with a unique vibrancy, a testament to the resilience and camaraderie of its young inhabitants. Vash, now 14, had grown taller and leaner. His once timid demeanor had been replaced by a sharp, confident gaze and an air of quiet determination. His time in the House of the Forsaken had honed his instincts and skills, making him adept at navigating the labyrinthine streets of Meridia and surviving its many perils. He had become a vital member of their tight-knit group, his resourcefulness and quick thinking earning him the respect and trust of his peers. Beside him was Silas, a year older and already a seasoned veteran of the streets when Vash had first arrived. Silas's shaggy dark hair framed a face marked by countless scrapes and narrow escapes, his green eyes always alert, always calculating. He was a natural leader, his charisma and cunning making him a figure of both admiration and caution among the other orphans. Silas had taken Vash under his wing from the start, recognizing in him a kindred spirit and potential ally. One warm, bustling afternoon, Vash and Silas stood on a street corner near the marketplace, observing the ebb and flow of merchants, townsfolk, and the occasional guard. The scent of salt water mixed with the aromas of street food wafted through the air, a familiar and oddly comforting blend that spoke of Meridia's vibrant life. Silas nudged Vash with his elbow, breaking the silence between them. "You've got that look again," he remarked, his tone light, but with an edge of curiosity. Vash turned to him, raising an eyebrow. "What look? The one that says you're about to get us into something." Silas grinned, his teeth flashing white against his tanned skin. "Something that'll either get us a fortune or get us into trouble, maybe both." Vash chuckled, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "I was just thinking about the flower storage near the docks. We're running low, and if we can get in and out without being seen—" Silas's grin widened, the thrill of the challenge lighting up his eyes. "Always the schemer, aren't you? All right, let's do it. But we'll need a couple more hands for this one. Heavy sacks, remember?" They shared a conspiratorial glance before setting off to gather their accomplices, the unspoken promise of adventure and the bond of their friendship guiding them through the bustling streets of Meridia. Vash and Silas made their way through the narrow alleys of Meridia, their footsteps echoing off the cobblestone streets. The city's maze-like pathways were as familiar to them as the lines on their palms, each twist and turn leading them closer to their destination. They approached a small courtyard where a group of children played, their laughter ringing out against the backdrop of the city's constant hum. Among the children, two stood out, Lyra and Finn. Lyra, a slender girl with wild auburn hair and freckles that dotted her nose like constellations, was a master of stealth. Her nimble fingers and quick reflexes made her the best pickpocket in the House of the Forsaken. Despite her tough exterior, her eyes held a warmth and a spark of mischief that endeared her to everyone she met. Finn, on the other hand, was a sturdy boy with a shock of blonde hair and a perpetual grin. His strength was a valuable asset during their heists, and his jovial nature provided much-needed levity in their often perilous endeavors. Though he had a tendency to act before thinking, his loyalty and courage were unwavering. Vash and Silas approached the pair, who were in the midst of a spirited game of chase with some of the younger children. Lyra noticed them first, her keen eyes missing nothing. She nudged Finn and pointed toward the approaching duo. "Looks like trouble," Lyra said with a smirk, brushing a strand of hair out of her face. "What do you think they want?" Finn stopped in his tracks, his grin widening. Knowing them, probably something exciting, or dangerous, or both. Vash smiled as they reached the two. "Got a job for you if you're interested," he said, his voice low to avoid attracting unwanted attention. Lyra crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing playfully. "Does it involve a decent haul and a bit of adventure?" Silas nodded, his expression serious. "Flower storage near the docks. We're running low, and we need to stock up. It's a big job, though. We'll need your skills to get in and out without being caught." Finn clapped his hands together, excitement gleaming in his eyes. "Count me in. Been itching for some real action." Lyra's smirk softened into a genuine smile. "All right, I'm in too, but if we get caught, you're taking the blame, Vash." Vash chuckled. "Fair enough. Let's move quickly. The fewer eyes on us, the better." With their team assembled, the four children set off towards the docks, their footsteps blending into the symphony of Meridia's lively streets. The promise of adventure and the thrill of the heist fueled their every step, uniting them in purpose and camaraderie. The docks of Meridia were a hive of activity, with sailors unloading cargo and merchants haggling over prices. The air was thick with the scent of salt and fish, mingling with the aroma of exotic spices from distant lands. Vash, Silas, Lyra, and Finn moved through the bustling throng with practiced ease, their eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of trouble. The flour storage was located in a large weathered warehouse near the edge of the docks. The building's wooden walls were faded and warped from years of exposure to the sea air, and a faint layer of flour dust clung to its surfaces, hinting at the precious cargo within. The children had cased the warehouse before and knew the layout well enough to navigate it swiftly and silently. As they approached the warehouse, Vash motioned for them to stop and huddle close. "All right, here's the plan," he whispered, his eyes darting around to ensure no one was watching. "Lyra, you'll pick the lock on the side door. Finn, once we're inside, you help me carry the sacks. Silas, you keep watch and signal us if anyone comes." Lyra nodded, her fingers already itching to get to work. She slipped a set of lockpicks from her pocket and approached the door, her movements as fluid as a cat's. Within moments, the lock clicked open, and she pushed the door ajar with a triumphant grin. "Piece of cake," she murmured, stepping aside to let the others enter. The interior of the warehouse was dimly lit, with shafts of sunlight piercing through the gaps in the wooden walls. Stacks of flour sacks were piled high, their surfaces dusted with a fine white powder. The air was cool and dry, the silence only broken by the distant calls of gulls outside. Vash and Finn moved quickly, selecting the heaviest sacks they could manage. Finn grabbed the largest one, slinging it over his shoulders with determination. With a swift motion, he then took hold of two more, one in each hand, his strength evident as he balanced the weight. Meanwhile, Vash struggled momentarily before finding his balance. They worked in tandem, each movement coordinated and efficient. Silas stood near the door, his eyes scanning the area outside. Every now and then he glanced back at his friends, ensuring they were making good progress. His nerves were taut, but he trusted in their plan and their abilities. As they worked, Vash couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. They had come a long way from the frightened children who had first found refuge in the House of the Forsaken. Now they were a team, capable of taking on challenges and surviving in a city that offered little mercy. "Got another one," Finn said, breaking Vash's reverie. He handed Vash a sack, and together they moved towards the door, careful not to make any noise. Just as they were about to exit, Silas hissed a warning. "Someone's coming!" The group froze, their hearts pounding in unison. Vash motioned for them to hide behind a stack of sacks, their breaths held as the footsteps grew closer. The door creaked open, and a shaft of light illuminated the dusty floor. Vash peeked out from his hiding spot, his eyes widening as he saw a figure stepping into the warehouse. "Who's there?" the guard called out, his voice filled with suspicion. Silas glanced back at his friends and gave a quick nod before darting off, his footsteps deliberately heavy to ensure the guard followed him. The guard, distracted by the noise, chased after Silas, leaving the others with a narrow window to escape. Vash, Lyra, and Finn seized the moment, slipping out the door and into the shadowed streets of Meridia. The sacks of flour weighed heavily on their shoulders, each step a struggle as they navigated the labyrinthine alleys. Their hearts raced, the adrenaline of their narrow escape coursing through their veins, pushing them to move faster. The streets were a blur of dimly lit corners and looming shadows. Vash led the way, his mind focused on the familiar path back to the House of the Forsaken. Lyra followed closely, her smaller frame easily maneuvering the tight spaces, while Finn brought up the rear, his strength ensuring their precious cargo remained secure. As they hurried through the maze-like alleys, the sound of their own breathing and the pounding of their hearts filled their ears. Every turn brought a new surge of hope, but also the fear of encountering another obstacle. Suddenly, a figure leaped from the roof of a nearby building, landing deftly beside them. Vash nearly dropped his sack in surprise, but quickly recognized Silas, a triumphant grin on his face. "Lost him," Silas said breathlessly. "Had to take a shortcut over the roofs. Let's keep moving before he realizes he's been duped." With renewed determination, the group pressed on. Silas took the lead, guiding them through narrower passages that offered better cover. The weight of the sacks seemed lighter with every step, their collective will driving them forward. Just as they left the dock area, they nearly collided with a group of figures. Vash found himself face to face with Princess Pirate Althea, her commanding presence undeniable. Althea was renowned as the niece of the infamous Captain Caspian Vael, a legendary pirate and one of the captain's lords in the Pirates' Guild. Known across the seas for his daring exploits and fearsome reputation, Caspian Vael was a name that commanded respect and fear. Althea, fierce and beautiful, was a legend in her own right. She smiled playfully as she recognized Vash. "Well, well, if it isn't Vash and his merry band of thieves," she teased, her voice carrying a hint of flirtation. Her eyes flicked to the sacks they carried. "Those look heavy. Need some help?" Vash, completely enchanted by her, stammered, "We're fine, just on our way back home." Althea stepped closer, resting a hand casually on one of the sacks. "Really? Because it looks like you could use a hand, or maybe a cart." Vash's heart pounded in his chest, words failing him. Before he could respond, Althea's bodyguard, a hulking figure of menace, pushed him aside roughly. The sack tore open and Vash was covered in a cloud of flour. "We don't have time for this, my lady," the bodyguard growled. "We must keep moving." Silas quickly stepped in, grabbing Vash by the arm. "Apologies, Althea. We'll be on our way." Althea ignored the bodyguard's urgency, her eyes fixed on Vash. "Do you know my uncle, Caspian Vael?" she asked, her voice softening slightly. "He's taught me everything about these streets and the seas beyond. He always says that every encounter has its price, and you seem to be racking up quite a debt." Vash swallowed hard, his admiration for Althea mingled with fear. "I've heard of him, everyone has. He's a legend." Althea's eyes sparkled with pride. "Indeed he is, and he always taught me to recognize potential. You've got guts, Vash, but guts alone won't keep you safe in Meridia." The bodyguard, growing impatient, grunted, "We need to go, my lady." Althea sighed, giving Vash one last lingering look. "Remember, nothing in Meridia comes without a price. Stay out of trouble, boys, and maybe, just maybe, our paths will cross again." As she turned to leave, Vash couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and disappointment. Silas kept a firm grip on his arm, leading them through the alleys until they reached the safety of the House of the Forsaken. The worn facade and creaky doors of the orphanage belied the warmth and camaraderie within. As the children entered, the familiar scent of cooking and the sounds of laughter greeted them. The other orphans gathered around, their curious eyes wide with anticipation. "We made it back," Silas announced, dropping the sack of flour with a thud. "And guess who we ran into?" The room buzzed with interest. Gareth, the red-haired boy with a knack for storytelling, leaned forward. "Who? Tell us." "Princess Pirate Althea," Lyra said, her eyes twinkling with the thrill of the encounter. "And her giant of a bodyguard. It was close." Gareth's eyes widened in disbelief. "No way! And you got away? How?" Finn laughed, still covered in a fine layer of flour. "All thanks to Silas." All eyes turned to Silas, who was smirking proudly, though he gave Vash a nudge. "Yeah, but it was Vash who froze up as soon as he saw Althea. You should have seen him, all starry-eyed like he was about to confess his love." The room erupted into laughter and teasing, the tension from the close call melting away. The children poked fun at Vash, their words filled with a mix of affection and amusement. "Look at you, Vash, falling for the Princess Pirate herself." Mira, one of the older girls, teased. "Next time, try not to lose your nerve along with the flour." Vash, now blushing, tried to laugh it off. "I was just Caught off guard, that's all." As the laughter subsided, Ilara entered the room. Her warm smile faded into a look of concern when she saw their flour-dusted appearances. "What happened here?" Ilara asked, feigning a stern look. "Did you all try your hand at cooking again?" The children chuckled, but Silas stepped forward, his tone turning serious. "We ran into Althea and her bodyguard just as we were leaving the docks. It got a bit rough, but we managed to get away." Ilara's eyes widened with a mixture of worry and admiration. "Althea, Caspian Vale's niece. You're lucky to have gotten away. With the pirate lords in port, that's never a good sign. The docks will be crawling with dangerous people, and it's better to stay out of their way." She turned to address the room, her tone firm. "No one goes to the docks unless absolutely necessary. It's too risky right now. We need to avoid drawing any unwanted attention. Stick to the safer parts of the city and stay out of trouble. Understood?" The children nodded, the seriousness of Ilara's words sinking in. Vash, still flustered from the teasing, nodded earnestly. "We won't, Ilara." Ilara turned to Vash, her expression softening, gave Vash a pat on the shoulder. "Just make sure your head stays on your shoulders, love-struck or not." Finn, ever the joker, couldn't resist one last jibe. Or maybe next time, Vash will ask Althea to sail off into the sunset instead of just standing there gawking. The room filled with laughter again, and even Vash couldn't help but smile, though his thoughts were still lingering on the encounter.